Hello and welcome to Book Lovers Companion. My name is Edith and right next to me is my lovely co-host, the Chattering Teacup.
Hello.
And here with us for this episode, dear listeners, returning guest Jazzy Mitchell. Hello, Jazzy.
Hi, pleasure to be here again.
Pleasure to have you on our show again. It's wonderful. A new book came out this year, Leveling Up. That's why we're here.
End of January, not long ago at all.
Very new, very fresh, warm from the press. But before we start talking about your book, I wanted to ask you something else because I saw the posts on Facebook and on Twitter. You have been on a writer's retreat only recently, haven't you?
Yes, just returned on Monday. So I was there for 4 days. It's on the Oregon coast, and I met up with 5 other writers. And we had a great time. We did it 2 years ago, right before the lockdown. So we hadn't seen each other in a couple of years. And I got some writing done for my next project. So I was very happy with that. Able to pick the minds of some great writers, which is always helpful. And just communicating with other writers kind of gets the juices going, helps your imagination to branch out a bit more than just within yourself. So it was a great time.
At such a retreat, are all the writers writing something similar or completely different genres?
They're completely different from me. They're mostly male. So a couple of them write bisexual stories. No one else was writing female, like I do. No lesfic for them. So that's why it was interesting because they have different perspectives. But storytelling is pretty much the same as far as how you do it and the technical aspects of it. So it was a great exchange of ideas.
And genre-wise, was every genre there or just romance?
Most of them write murder mysteries or crime novels. So that's, again, something I haven't done too much of. I did write a thriller romance with You Matter. And I'm now working on book 2 of You Matter, which also will have some thriller tendencies, some criminal parts to it. So I think that talking to them helped me to define where I wanted to go in that direction, since I don't usually write it.
And how long were you there?
I was there for 4 days. It was magical, right on the coast. Beautiful ocean.
Yeah, sounds. Did you get any writing done then?
I did. I got about 9,000 words, which doesn't sound like a lot, but that's the whole beginning point. So that's actually a good chunk to get started on. And I also wrote an outline, which I sometimes stick to. Usually I end up revising that outline, but it gives me a starting point and lets me know where I'm trying to go. So yeah, I got it done.
And how does it usually work? Do you say, okay, we're going to meet tomorrow at 10 and talk about something, or how is it organized?
The house rules are that for so many hours, it's quiet time, which means we don't really talk to each other. It's usually right after breakfast and then up until, the beginning of the afternoon when we usually stop for lunch. So there's no talking inside for that. If you want to talk to someone, you can go outside the house. You can take a walk. We kind of all spread out into the different rooms. So some people end up sitting on the couch with their laptops, and other people are sitting at a table that has the view of the ocean. I kind of commandeered the corner where there's this chair, a lounge chair, and then it looks out right into the ocean, and I have a little table. So I just kind of go over there, and they know that's Jazzy's chair. So
that sounds perfect to me. Absolutely. Yeah.
Nice. It's very loose. We can interact as much or as little as we want to. And in the evenings, we usually are together, and we would do some readings to each other and get that kind of support and feedback, which is always wonderful. One of the nights, actually, we watched the Oscars that were on TV, the Academy Awards. That was interesting.
Okay.
But yeah, so we do different things. We all cook the food together. One night we usually get something from a restaurant, but the other nights everything's cooked. We brought all the food with us, and we have some wonderful cooks there. So, which is lucky for me because I can't cook. So it's like a holiday.
It sounds like one indeed. A creative holiday where you get your juices flowing.
That's right. We all need to recharge sometimes.
Yeah, especially now, I think, after the last 2 years.
Yeah, that's definitely true because when you're in your house all the time, you can really wear you down.
Yeah.
Even if you're not in your house all the time, but only going to work and back again, it's not much better.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think sometimes you just need to be pulled out of your routine.
Yeah, we need that. I think we all need that now. Yeah, absolutely.
I highly recommend it.
We will do it. We keep fingers crossed that we can do it in May, so we're going for that.
It's planned.
It's planned. It's all booked and it's all planned, and we are going no matter what. So
that's right. You just decide you're going no matter what.
Yes, absolutely. So now coming to your new book, Leveling Up.
Yes.
It takes place in the gaming community production scene. Yeah. And are you a secret gamer?
No, I'm not actually. I would say my son is more a gamer than I am. And I did ask him some questions about what platforms he uses and how community gaming works and things like that, just to get a feel. And after I wrote the manuscript, I reached out to some content experts and asked them to read the manuscript and let me know if anything seemed inappropriate or if it just kind of threw the reader out of the story because it wasn't the right terminology. Or because I go into a little bit about how it's produced, so I didn't want to write the wrong sequence of how things are produced or use the wrong names of the different titles for people within a company for video game making. So that I always think if you can get a content writer, if you can get an expert, on that, you definitely want to reach out and get one.
And how much research was done in the end? On your end for this whole background story of being a gaming producer or a developer or about the whole software side? It sounds complicated probably for people who have never been involved in gaming or anything like that.
Right. Yeah. I seem to keep doing this to myself where I have to do tons of research for basically every book I write. And it's true for this story too. I had to do a couple months worth of research. 10 years ago, I couldn't have written this book because there wouldn't have been as much information on the net for it. But I went down the rabbit hole a few times. I would follow something and, find a site for a video game developing company and look at that. I looked up different degree programs for writing video games. So there's a lot of different areas where I did the research, and then I'd say 90% of it never goes onto the page. But I needed that understanding in order to write about it and feel comfortable with it.
Yeah. And your two characters, Fran and Clark. Fran is for me, or was for me, when I read the book, I can't speak for the chattering teacup, but for me, she was a little bit of a contrary character, it seemed.
Yes, she's older. She's had, different challenges in her life. She doesn't trust easily. And with her unresolved feelings about Clark, I think that made everything a little more difficult with her because she wanted to open up, but she didn't want to get hurt. So it was a learning curve for her and how to be a good companion, basically, and how to navigate that relationship with Clark.
What stood out for me the most in the book is there's a lot of insecurity in this moment.
In both of them.
Yeah, in
That's
both
what
of them.
you said.
Although they are successful in their job, highly successful at least, but why are they so insecure? Is it ingrained in women nowadays, or is it?
Yeah, that's a great question because, females have been pushed down for a long time and we're not, a lot of times we have to guard our own feelings. We can't express them because we're afraid that they won't be accepted, that they will be dismissed, that maybe they're not worthy of those emotions and working through those. They're both insecure. And the thing is, they both react to that insecurity in very different ways that really hurt their relationship at times. A lot of people point out when Fran met Clark's parents and how horribly she behaved. Well, she reverted back to her insecurities, and the way she deals with it is she tries to control the situation as much as possible. And she kind of feeds into the negativity. So her thought process is, well, if people think I'm a horrible person and I'm always controlling, I treat people, in a cavalier fashion, then I'm going to go ahead and do that 10 times that amount that they think. I'm just going to push it in their face. I don't care what they think. And so she reverted to that, and it was a horrible scene, the way that came out. She almost lost Clark because of it. Clark, on the other other hand, is very insecure, and she just came out of a year ago, came out of a horrible relationship where she was being basically verbally abused all the time by her lover, and then her lover double-crossed her, and this was the beginning of the book. Her ex basically stole the schematics of this video game and then sold it to Fran's company, knowing that Clark had unresolved feelings for Fran. So she really stuck it to her. And I think for anyone who goes through something like that, they're going to really feel insecure and they're not going to know what to do. And Clark in particular, she's a type of person who holds in her feelings, doesn't express them, is afraid to express them. She doesn't want to rock the boat at all. She just kind of wants to float through and let her significant other call the shots all the time.
And I also wanted to ask you about, again, women in this kind of business. How very common is it? I mean, in front of the computer screen, I suppose, I know nothing about the gaming industry or whatever. I'm not a gamer at all. Are there a lot of female gamers? And what about the people behind the scenes? I mean, Fran is the CEO of this company. And what about these percentages of female CEOs, of female developers, female gamers, and the male ones? Do you know anything about it, or have you found out anything about it?
I did do some research, and it's a great question. I think it's similar to any of the tech industries. There aren't a lot of women at the top, and to get to the top, they really have to fight the way up there and deal with a lot of discrimination from the male counterparts. Because I know people in tech too, and they've had the same problems where there aren't that many at the top, and they're constantly having to fight their way up there and then fight to maintain their position. So it's quite precarious, and you really have to, in some ways, learn how to navigate that and turn a blind eye to the discrimination and the patriarchal mentality up in those businesses.
Is it a bit different if, as you mentioned in the book, also a lot of video creators and developers are working for for the film industry? Is it different there, or is it more or less the same?
It's more or less the same for film, TV shows, as well as video games. And some graphic designers, they go into website design, which is why Clark in the book, she actually helps out with the website updates up to the launch time. So it's all in there. A video graphic designer and animator, they have undergraduate degrees that usually have to do with writing, because they're writing out the blurbs and the descriptions for the characters, or if you're doing the website, the descriptions on the website. So all of that's in there. It's a creative way that's all intertwined. You have the writing, you have the graphic design, the drawing. Most of them are artists in that sense, either hand drawing and or drawing using the different video programs out there where you draw on the computer. So, and for animation. So all of that's in there. And because all of those skills have to be honed to do these types of jobs, it is across the board. You can work as a video game designer, but you can also work in the film industry. You could be a contractual worker, and do like one little part of a film, like say in a Disney film or something like Frozen, you might be doing this one little scene, and that's what you contracted for, just that 1 to 2 minute part.
And let's call him your antagonist in the story. He has links to the military and he is male. Have you thought, just asking, I'm not trying to be offensive, just asking, have you thought of making him female as well?
Yes, I know. And in this day and age, people take exception if you don't. I know you're not saying that, but some people feel that if you use a certain type of person in a certain type of role, that you're just stereotyping across the board. That really wasn't what I was doing in this. But, it would, of course, be interesting if it were a female, and especially if I use the same type of actions and characteristics that I use for the man. And it would be interesting to see how people would have reacted to that. But because do we expect a woman to act the same way as a man in the same situation? It's a great question to contemplate. How would that change the storyline?
Because isn't that what sometimes or often it is on the one hand expected of women, and yet at the same time people abhor them for that. They don't like it if they act as or like their male counterparts. And yet, on the other hand, they have to, and it is expected, because otherwise, how should or could they stay on top?
Yeah, I mean, I could have easily, I think he's comparable or a type of foil for Fran, because Fran's also at the top, and they're basically peers, as far as where they are. And he's pompous, and he can be cruel, and he can, be controlling and a bit outrageous. And Fran, I can make a case for her being the same way within her own rules.
Yeah, we just don't see it so much in the book.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
We see her other side.
Yeah. True.
Well, that's what makes her human. We don't see his other side. We see him as a real jerk and, overstepping and the whole deal. Fran, I'll let you see how she is at work and how she can really, behave poorly. But you also get to see her unraveling with Clark and letting Clark in, and her softer side, and how thoughtful she can actually be at times.
Would you agree that, I suppose it goes for male and female CEOs, not ours, but anyway, that's a different kind of story, but they have to have a certain kind of psychological makeup?
Yeah, I would think so. And when you get to the top of the heap like that, you've probably taken tons of seminars and education on how to manage a company and your employees and get what you want, and all of that. So I think to some point, people who get to the top like that, they have been instructed over the years on how to get there and how to maintain it. And that really does affect the way they act with their employees and with other people.
And this was my observation while reading your book. Could it be, correct me if I'm wrong, of course, that this one is more erotic than a few of the others?
I would say that is true. I always try and give a couple of good sex scenes, and not just gratuitous. I like it to push forward that the plot. In this one, there were more intimate scenes because from the very beginning, they start a sexual relationship, and they really need to navigate their feelings as they go along. You can see how their interactions change over time. And the longer they are together, when they make love is actually more loving. So, at the beginning, they were in love with each other, but not ready to divulge their feelings or allow the other person to know any of that. They just said, okay, we're just going to do this because there's obviously a connection with us and, that sizzle. But then as time goes on, you can see how their lovemaking does change. They're getting closer. They're allowing their emotions to show, and they're starting to even let each other know in little ways how they feel.
And how was it for you writing this more erotic kind of plot lines?
Well, it was a challenge. I think when you have a lot of scenes like that, you don't want all of them to sound the same. But there are some things you might want to keep there to show the personality of each of the people. But also you want to show, when you have a bunch of these scenes, you want to show the differences in them. You want to show the nuances. You want to show how their feelings are changing, their reactions are changing. You don't want to read the first scene and then the last sex scene and have them sound the same. That's really no fun. Yeah. But for a writer, that's really hard to be able to write different types of scenes and have them all sound authentic for those characters.
Yeah, they have to fit the character, don't they?
Right. Yeah, definitely.
And do you think you will stay in this line of writing a bit more, or just asking?
I haven't written erotica, which means that there would be no book without the sex scenes. But this book, I would say, could be fine without the sex scenes. I think it wasn't just dependent on them. I think it drove them forward, but I don't think it was erotica per se. I probably will write more like that, although the project I'm doing now might not even have any sex scenes in it, actually. It's a thriller, so I'm not sure.
Yeah, you don't have to. I mean, we spoke about it last time. It doesn't have to be.
No,
if it's not needed, not every book needs that. I think. Yeah.
Yeah, Leveling Up needed the sex scenes. They needed that intimacy, But the book I'm writing now, it's a thriller. And really what's going to push that plot forward is what's happening, throughout that book. And it's not about any intimate relations or romance or anything like that.
I think in this book, the characters weren't able, it's really easy at the beginning, to express their feelings or their closeness without sex. They weren't able to express it in words. So that's why they needed it.
Yeah. And as we discussed, they were both so insecure that for them, they had to express their emotions physically many times. That's how they were able to do that until they felt secure enough to express their feelings in words.
Yeah, it's sometimes harder, isn't it? I mean, not just for fictional characters, but in general.
Because if you say it, it's out there. And if you act something, you can always say, that's not how I meant it.
Right.
Yeah.
And that plays into their characters perfectly, actually, because they were insecure. They wanted a way to downplay how they acted. And you can do that without saying how you're feeling.
Yeah. Would you also say, or was it the intention on your side as the author to make them like that because also of their age difference? Because it does play a part. I mean, I would say the age difference isn't that huge, but it is still felt somehow because Fran is at the point in her life where Clark is not yet. She will come there or she will get there, but not right now.
Yeah, the play, I did that on purpose too. I think that transition from being a mentor, mentee, employer, employee can be tough. And because there is an age difference, Fran is much more secure where she is, and Clark is still ascending to wherever she's going to end up. I mean, she's doing great, but she's, only been doing it for so long, 6 years. And so there is that disparity there. And it's natural that there would be an age difference concerning those two, since you have the work relationship. So that's just another area. And economically, Fran's much more rich than Clark is at this point too. So they're dealing with a lot of huge issues that people deal with in a relationship. If there is a disparity in age or profession, anything like that, you're going to have to deal with those in some way. They don't do the best job of it, but they get there.
And I think maybe it also makes it a bit more difficult if there's a child involved, because sometimes Clark realizes that she's closer in age to the daughter of Fran than to Fran. And I think it's then you feel it different than if there wouldn't be a child.
Right. Yeah. The child, I went back and forth on that. I really wanted to have Fran have her daughter because, she was married before and she loves her daughter. She works very hard. Her daughter's in college now, so she's a bit lonely. And it's kind of the perfect time for her to go into a relationship, But I think that if Fran didn't have that redeeming quality, we'd really think she wasn't multifaceted. We'd probably think she's just this cruel CEO who's using this young thing who's a rising star. But when you have her with a child, you see that, and see her open up to that child and be much friendlier and softer and the whole thing. It really gives another dimension to that character. And I always say, if you want to redeem a character, they either have a child or a doggy or a kitty or some sort of pet, And then you can see that they are not all bad.
Yeah,
that's true. But don't kill the dog, please.
No, we will never kill the dog. You can't come back from that.
Yes, you can't. You can do anything you like, but never kill a dog.
Right. Right.
No pet.
No pet.
Don't kill any pets.
Yeah, that's just not done at all. Not good for you as a writer. To get your books out there. Get it out there, but you can't sell them. Since now I mentioned sales. Before we started our recording, we talked a little bit about book sales. And you said, surprisingly enough for us, that sales were down. And it has a lot to do with visibility. So can you tell us a little bit about that, what we mentioned before for our listeners? What is or what happened or how did you experience it?
So we had been locked down for, since March 2020. And it's really just lifting now. So during that time, we saw a marked difference in sales. The sales went down, particularly last year. They just went way, way down. They weren't selling at all. Writers also slowed down. There was a slowdown in books that were actually published during that time period. It's gone up now. But for a while, people just weren't writing. They weren't able to for a variety of reasons. I had just been finishing up a book. So I got Undertow had published in 2020. And then I didn't have anything published last year. And then Leveling Up came in at the end of January this year. So there was a lag even for me. And for others, for some others, it was much worse for them. They just could not write at all. And as far as the publishing houses, of course, that had an effect on them, right? Because if you don't have your writers writing, you can't publish anything. So with particularly the smaller presses, the sales were down across the board. And I've talked to several different publishers over, the time period. And they just said everything was down. There was, no real reason, just sales were horrible. New writers weren't getting the sales at all. And, it was just a really horrible consequence of COVID and the shutdown. And, with the shutdown, we didn't have a lot of or really any in-person effects, in-person interactions with people. There were no cons or anything like that. They became virtual, which is better than nothing, of course. But really, it's when you're able to interact in person with other people, that's where you make the sales. Truly. And so I think that was also a problem that caused the slowdown in the sales.
And would you say that the lesbian fiction niche was especially affected? I mean, you said before we started recording, all genres were affected by that. All kinds of writers, the sales went down. But would you say that this niche especially?
I really only spoke to people within the lesbian fiction community or, those small houses. Sometimes they'll do, gay or transgender or bi or whatever it is, the whole makeup of the LGBTQ plus. That went down. I have no knowledge of what happened or didn't happen in the larger sphere of publishing, but I know in our little boutique niche that we have, and particularly with the smaller presses, that the sales were affected drastically. Now, as far as Bella or Bold Strokes or even Ilva, I don't know that they were affected because they're larger. They have more authors, and they have a better budget for advertising and promoting their authors. So I think that makes a difference too.
So it comes down again to money, doesn't it?
Yeah, but
doesn't it always?
Yeah, it does.
But I find it somehow strange because when people were at home, at least I would have looked up for more books because then I would have had the time. And what's better time to read?
I would think so too. And I did read a bunch of books, especially in the beginning. I was like, yay, I'm at home. I can, but I think the stress of being home all the time and worrying about COVID and having all the regular stresses that you have when you're not homebound, I think that might have caught up with a lot of people where you just can't concentrate on reading. Like I heard that audiobooks went much higher during this time. And that makes sense because maybe people walk around and listening to it while they're doing their stuff instead of staring at a computer or reading from a book. Audio sales were really going well. Now, it didn't help me at all because my press doesn't do audiobooks. So my sales weren't positively impacted at all. But, there are different presses that, of course, that have audiobooks or people did it on their own and those sold.
Yeah, true. And you also said to become visible or be more visible, you and some fellow authors of yours started a self-organized streaming, what shall we call it, event, special thing.
Yes.
Tell our listeners a little bit about that. So they know where they can just pop in and listen to you and the others.
So Desert Palm Press, we approached and asked if we could set up some live streaming events to promote our authors. We have a bunch of new authors. I believe four of them just had their books published like this week. We wanted to help them get out there, because it's a harder time to be seen by possible readers. So we approached our publisher, Lee Fitzsimmons, and she was wonderful. And she footed the bill for the streaming service. And now every other week, we're basically going to be streaming something on the Facebook Desert Palm Press page, as well as the Desert Palm Press YouTube page. And then whoever is guest starring for that event on a given day, they'll be streaming on their own pages too. And what we're doing is readings, which are great. Like the next one we have is April 10th, and then 2 weeks later we'll have something else. So one event is 2 authors are highlighted. They read from their excerpt of whatever book or project they're on, and then they answer a bunch of questions, and including questions that are received throughout the streaming event by people watching it. And then 2 weeks later, we do an author spotlight where we have 5 or 6 authors from Desert Palm Press read from their books and then answer some questions from people that are streaming through. And so we're going to do that every other week. And that way we can highlight the authors, give them some face time, help people get to know them a bit. Until we can see people in person again. You know, we just want to boost up our fellow authors and make sure that they are being introduced to everyone, as many people as we can.
And when did you start this kind of events?
We started it, March 20th was our first one. So I was one of the 2 spotlighted. It was me. And then Emily Four, who is a brand new writer, just had her first book released, I think, yesterday. So we want to get these new writers up for people to see.
So with yesterday, dear listeners, she means the 1st of April, and it was not an April prank or joke. It's true.
No, not an April break. Hey, you came to see me? Sorry, no.
Were they recorded so that people can watch the recordings?
Yes, they were recorded. I have it on my Facebook pages and my YouTube page, and I think I might even post it on Twitter. So yes, and that's one of the great things about this program is that you can see it live, but if you don't, you can see it on the pages later on. You can watch it at your leisure.
Oh, that's a plus point of the whole technology thing, isn't it?
And also,
definitely.
the time difference.
Oh, yeah, time difference. Tell me about it. I always get a little bit antsy. I think, did I get it right? Oh, is someone waiting for me?
I know.
Yeah.
I know. And like you, I use the world clock, but there's certain times of the year it just not work out, you know? We just had the daylight saving time, and that messed us up with one of the times because they didn't have daylight saving times yet. You know, Europe is later.
Yeah. Because you are a week earlier, I think
so,
than we are.
Yeah.
So it's completely...
It caused some problems.
Yeah. And there are some countries that
don't
change the time
Don't change
anymore.
the time.
They don't change it, right.
How can you?
And I used to live in Arizona where they don't change the time ever. It's just the same time throughout the year.
How? Okay, now I'm...
Because I thought...
How does that even work?
The whole of the United States
it was hard.
the time.
And we were confused all the time. Let's put it that way.
I understand that.
I would be confused as well.
Yes.
That's for sure. And do you plan to continue these events? Even when you can still meet people in person?
We are, at least this year. I mean, I've already scheduled out to the summer. So I think we'll probably try and do it through this year and see what the response is. And if it's helping our authors and helping readers and just as successful. If we see that that people are attending or watching it afterwards, then we will continue it. And if not, then it was a great experience, you know, just to do it for... 9 months or whatever.
And what did the analytics tell you after these few events up to right now? I mean, what about the viewers? What about the clicks for your books and such?
Right. So I won't really know about the book sales for me for at least another month, for 1 to 2 months, you know. So we'll see. I mean, I did see a bump when I looked through, but I don't have the actual numbers. There were several people who saw the event and commented during the event. And then people were commenting after the fact too. So there is getting some replay, which it's all very, very good as far as the analytics are showing from what I can see. So we'll continue on. And the hope is, you know, when we do the 2 people, we try and do someone who's had several books published and then a newer author. We kind of combine them. And with the spotlight, we have, you know, these writers, they write all sorts of different things. So the one coming up, one is a thriller writer, the other is lesbian romance, another is some, you know, like I think she writes middle school romancers. So, you know, young adult. So we have a mixture, which also can bring in all these different people.
And I think, I mean, wasn't there the Goldie Awards only recently? Yeah.
Right. Yes.
But they were online.
GCLS. That was online. Now they are having their con this year. live in Albuquerque, Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
I'm actually going to it. So my hope is that, that's going to be great to see people in person, and I'll be able to hawk my wares and talk it up and stuff. I'll try and secure a spot for doing a author reading, which is always good. I can tell you, whenever I've gone to GCLS, I always try and go to the author readings so that I can see who the authors are. That's how I get to know whether or not I might want to read their books. So,
are they also planning to do it online as well? I mean, sort of no hybrid.
No, they're not going to do a hybrid. They had actually addressed it a few months ago that they just couldn't do both at the same time. Basically, it would be too tough. So what they have been doing this year is a virtual series. So like every month or so, they have something you can sign up for that is free, that you can attend via Zoom. So that, which is pretty cool. It's kind of like a compromise, I would say. And maybe at some point they will be able to do a hybrid. I think it would be a great thing to do because there's so many people who cannot make it. Yeah. Now, did you know, though, that in the next few years, they're already scheduling to go overseas? So there are a couple different possible places, but they would be in Europe and maybe more accessible.
Europe is also not that small.
Yeah, I know. I think it's true. I mean, I can't remember all the places that they were saying they were looking at, but one was London, one was, I think, in Scotland. I forget where the other one was, but maybe Paris or something.
London can never hurt. Please tell them.
I think
it's perfect.
Probably in English speaking.
Yeah.
Because
not in a German speaking country, probably not. No, that's too small an audience. But I mean, London is central.
London would be good, though. We have a lot of people in the UK that could definitely make that.
It's easy to reach. Because it's a big city, so
right. So that won't be for a couple of years, but that's something to look forward to. And so they have been listening, and now they're making changes to be able to give more people the ability to go.
Absolutely. I mean, like you said, they are not planning on doing the hybrid thing, but I think maybe you should look into it again, because from our experience with, say, crime fiction events, it is a huge plus side, and they did it again the following years because they realized there was a lot of interest. And like you said, people couldn't go there from, I don't know, Spain or Italy because either of the time issue, the money, but they did still attend the online events.
Because if you have to travel there, you might attend a few, but if they're also online, you can then attend more. Because you're interested in them. But traveling there needs time, it needs money, and it's limited.
Yeah, and it costs a lot less for the virtual too. I mean, as a writer attending them, I was paying a lot less online for the GCLS convention than I'm paying to go in person this summer.
And I also wanted to ask you, you mentioned a little bit about your future project or what's coming next. And what would you say, again, from your point of view as a writer, would help? I mean, not just to getting along with your books, but also to get them out there. Since we spoke about streaming and how to become visible, what would you need?
Oh, I need lots of events where I can talk about my book, read from my book, and answer questions about my book.
Okay, so
in person or virtually, I'm not picky.
Yeah. You're always welcome. I think I've told you that.
Thank you.
And I also mentioned to her, I mean, Fran and Clark coming back to your book, Leveling Up Again. I mean, they remind me of someone. Was that also intentional on your part? A little bit at least. I won't say who. Just read it, dear listeners. So,
yes. I did that on purpose. I really like that archetype. I really like that, the age gap, but also the whole ice queen being thawed out by the hot lava and the hot lava being lifted up emotionally and becoming more confident as their relationship develops. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah. I can see that, yep.
Is it a subgenre by itself, the age gap romance?
Oh, yes. Yeah, definitely. Age gap is a big one, a big trope. And I did a bunch of tropes for this one. So, that was fun. We already discussed some of it, the employer, employee, mentor, mentee, age gap. Second chance romance, that's another great trope. A workplace romance, a rich person and she's not really poor, but she's not rich like Fran.
Yeah.
So these are all tropes that people love to read, you know, and figuring out how to navigate that romance with all these things against them and all these disparities between the two, even their personalities and how they react to things are very different. And somehow they have to be able to bridge that gap.
And why do you think it is that people love to read these difficulties?
Well, you know, over the years, I've had people write to me and tell me that they had an age gap relationship. So they like seeing how someone else navigated it and the problems. And they were empathetic to it, particularly if they had dealt with something that was similar. Also, I don't know about you, but I had a crush on my English teacher, you know, at one point in high school. And it's common for a lot of people. They have a crush on someone they respect, who's in a role where they're kind of untouchable, but if I could just touch, you know. So that's another trope that they just love, that kind of forbiddenness of it, you know. So and in the workplace, it's not as forbidden, but there are rules in effect to protect particularly the employee. So it is forbidden in a sense, and you have to be very clear with what you're doing and where you're going with it.
So in the end, it's all a bit about the forbidden fruit.
Ooh.
Yeah, I would say so. And then the second chance, don't we all want that? I mean, you know, if you made a choice and later on you're like, oh, I regret that. Well, here she has a second chance to act differently with this person. And Fran takes it from the very beginning. She's like, yes, she just grabs at Clark and won't let her go.
Yeah, I mean, it's true. If you tell someone if you want someone to do something, just tell them not to do it. The best way to make them do it. I mean,
yeah, definitely. We do that with my daughter. We want her to do something and tell her not to do it.
oh yeah. So
Works great.
that's how parents work. We all know that. But
You know that?
Yeah, I knew that, but now we have it on tape. I don't know about my English teacher. That woman was horrible. Nah.
Yeah.
Maybe another one.
Maybe. No. Another teacher might be, but not my English teacher.
Oh, it could have been any teacher, right?
Yeah, true. Yeah, not my English teacher. No. Definitely not. Absolutely not. So, Jazzy, again, also the question for you. I mean, you've been on our show before, but still, I mean, a morsel of advice from you.
Words of the wise for me.
Yeah,
Gosh.
for our aspiring authors out there.
Well, I think the first thing is to don't read your reviews.
Better not then.
Well, you know, the thing is with these reviews, when they pan you, most of the time they're not giving you a reason. They're just doing a bad review, which is usually like 1 star or something like that. I really do appreciate if someone didn't like my story, I appreciate a reason for it. I want to know what it is. And then if it's not technical or if it's just that it was that the person didn't like the character, well, you know, they're entitled to their opinion. That doesn't mean it's a bad book. It means they just didn't like the characters. And I've certainly felt that reading some books too. I do feel that people who write bad reviews are not writers. I don't know of a writer who will write a bad review for another writer, unless they have a vendetta or something. But usually because we understand how important reviews are to drive our sales and how damaging a poor review will be. So that would be my first advice for a new writer. Don't read your reviews or don't internalize them if you're going to read them. You know, it's going to be one or the other, because it's kind of like when you first start writing and you get your first round of edits back and it's all ripped apart and you start crying because you're like, oh my God, I suck. It's never going to be published. It's not true. It's not true. Even good writers, even writers who publish, 10 books, whatever it is, their manuscripts normally get ripped apart to some extent because you're always trying to polish it and make it even better. So, that's the second part of, that I would say to a new writer is don't get too upset with the edits. And when it comes to stylistic edits, you have a choice on that. You can just keep it your style, or you could go and use the tips that your editor is giving you because the editor is trying to help you.
Yeah, that's true. Absolutely. And I'm not sure if I asked you that before, but was going independent ever in the book for you?
Yeah, you know what? I was just too lazy. Because it's just more stuff I have to learn as far as the formatting and how to upload it and what sizes. And why do that when I'm with a publisher, really? So, at some point I might do it. I actually did do self-publishing a long time ago, and it was fine, It's just a lot more work. And I really also wanted to be attached to a publishing house that was known to the lesbian community. I think that helps a lot to establish you. And now with 5 books, I think that my name is finally getting out there, to the extent that I want. And so at some point, maybe I could do self-publishing or maybe open up my own publishing company or whatever, right? I mean, I have all those opportunities now that I understand the process much more than when I first started out.
And from your experience as a writer and being within a publishing house, would you say that, or would you agree, let's put it that way, would you agree that although, lesbian fiction is also niche, and what would you say is even more a niche in a niche?
Sci-fi and fantasy, lesbian fiction. That's what I would say.
Sci-fi. You wouldn't put historical. Just asking that. Just
just by
I guess it
came
depends.
to the top of your head. I know. I would say that is also a small niche, and I'm not really sure which would be smaller: the historical lesbian fiction or the sci-fi and fantasy lesbian fiction. But I think that they're both small. I know some good writers in both niches, though, so it's certainly a niche that you can rise up in pretty quickly.
But if it's a romance, doesn't that counteract the smaller part?
Well, but it's really historical. So yes, the romance part, see, historical romance is very different than contemporary romance, as far as even just societal rules and the makeup of these characters and how they react to different things. It's all very different than contemporary romance. So some people don't like to read it. It's like cowboys, the cowboys in the Western fiction. Even if it's a lesbian romance, it's still a smaller niche than just lesbian romance. It's on the side there, the Western. So, and there are people who write just those.
And when, will you think this starts
to become
80s,
you mean
70s, 60s?
Contemporary?
Yeah, but when does it start to become uninteresting because it's too old? The time is
I see. I think it becomes not as it's not that it's not interesting, actually. It's just that some people don't understand it as well. They don't have that familiarity. So I think you're right. When you're looking at the time period, maybe it goes back to, it can go as far as, the 1960s. Really, with this generation, what do they really know about it unless they've studied it and been exposed to it? So it's really, the reader is really looking back into their own experiences and trying to connect with it. Now, those that really have found it interesting, like historical fiction, maybe Victorian age or whatever, or the early Western, when the U.S. was being infused with people and they were going west and the whole day. A lot of people love that time period and they study it and they're fascinated with it, and so that's a niche that some people will read all the time. And the same with the historical fiction. It's just depends on what they understand and if they can relate to it in some way.
Do you think that the audience in this kind of niche, the lesbian fiction, wants to identify more with the characters in the books than readers of other genres?
I don't think so. Not really. I mean, some of these romances, people read them because it's something that could never happen to them, and they want to live out someone else's fantasy or just get a different perspective, And there are a lot of lesbics that are about billionaires or millionaires or really successful.
They are not about me.
Wealthy
definitely.
people. And I would aspire to that, but I do not have personal experience. So.
Yes.
So it's fascinating for me to read that, and then there are people who really have had a hard knock life and then somehow rise from the ashes and people, and some people, they really relate to that from their own experiences. So they want to see how these characters made it, how they got through all the muck and found happiness.
Yeah.
So do you think because of that it is more difficult for writers writing in other countries to be accepted? Because it's society works differently on other continents.
Oh yeah, that's true. But also, if it's in present time, then I think people are very interested to find out what's going on in different parts of the world where they don't live, and they wouldn't know otherwise unless they're exposed to it somehow. I like those books, actually. And a lot of American writers, they actually write stories that are in Ireland or England or, wherever, France, Portugal, Scotland, I've seen some of those. So they write about these other countries that they don't live in for whatever reason. Sometimes they visit there, and so they have some knowledge of the area or they have relatives there. And sometimes they totally make it up. Mm-hmm. Either way, it's interesting. Mm-hmm. And so I think to some extent that it's okay. These writers outside of the US, they're going to do fine. I think it's just a little harder when you're writing about the distant past in other countries, because now the readers might not understand what's going on or why certain things are happening.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And coming back to the question of reviews or feedback from your readers, mm-hmm. because we had that before. So again, I'm wondering, do you know about difference in reception from, let's say, the United States or Europe or other parts of the country? I mean, especially if the books are very, what shall we call it, United States centered.
Right. That's a good question. I can only speak for my own books, and I've seen when I get reviews from across the pond, sometimes they really love the stories, and other times they don't feel like it was authentic enough, mm-hmm. or they just didn't understand the character, mm-hmm. why they reacted that mm-hmm. way. So I do think there is a bit of a disparity culturally mm-hmm. at times that can get in the way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, true. I think
I will say that, when you have a U.S. writer writing about it happening in the U.S. and they get the facts wrong for wherever that place is, that's irritating to me, because because I've been to just about every state in the U.S. over the years, and I have a good working knowledge of the U.S. So if I see that someone's writing something about Manhattan, New York City, and is absolutely could not occur there, like if someone's living in the Upper East Side and they say that they parked in their driveway or parked in their garage, I'm like, what are you talking about? They don't have them there. So I don't like that. The fact checking is really important. No matter where you are placing your characters, you have to be accurate. And if you're not, and the thing is, I think sometimes they don't even think to ask these authors. So that's a hard conundrum there. If you don't know the questions to ask, you can't get the answers, of course. But I would think from overseas, if you're reading something that's someplace outside of where you live, you kind of have to take it for the truth. So that's another reason why you want it to be accurate to some extent.
What about the other way around? Mentioning the rubber incident again, we had with our other guest, because I told her when I wrote a fan fiction story and someone threw a rubber at someone else.
Oh,
yeah,
really?
Exactly. And I know what she was throwing, and it wasn't a condom. So I was perfectly all right saying rubber, because that's what it is in British English.
Right.
So what about this way around?
Yeah. I think when you're writing about an area, you want to check your words, really. I know when I write about something in Scotland, I was writing something about that was there. I need to use their terminology and even their spelling of these words, because it does make a difference. You need to check on that. I think it comes back down to having a good editor too, though. To make sure that it is consistent with the environment you're setting your characters in.
Yeah, true.
But it comes back to the problem you mentioned before, that you have to have some idea that it might be different, because you can't check every word.
Right. Well, but there are words that you should signal you. I see in a lot of books, someone will call the ground the floor, and I think that's that's more of a European thing. And it's like, it's not a floor, it's a ground. It's there's dirt there. It's ground. It's not the floor. They didn't fall on the floor. The floor is inside the house. They're outside falling on the ground. Yeah. Well, in the US, that's how we do it. So, but and it's just an example. So there are plenty of words that mean something a little different. Yeah.
Absolutely true. Yeah. So Jazzy, anything else you would like our listeners to know? Future projects, whatever. What would you like to share with us?
I am working on book 2 of You Matter. You Matter, if you remember, it was about a man who tried to gun down his attorney when she lost his case. And he ends up dying at some point. That's not a spoiler, by the way. So in book 2, we are getting the point of view of the gunman's daughter, who is now a grown-up. She's an adult, 21, 22 years old, and she's out for revenge to avenge her father's death. Mm-hmm. We're going to see how that goes.
Ooh, sounds indeed dangerous.
Yeah,
yes, but remember, she's young and stupid.
Oh.
Young and stupid, 21 or 22, doesn't know all the facts about how her father died.
What he has done.
Interesting journey.
How that went.
Yeah. Well, and that's reasonable, right? Because she was only a teenager when her father died. So she doesn't know all the facts. And she's just going to try and get revenge. And she's going to find out a lot along the way.
Yeah. Might have idolized her father.
Probably. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Probably.
Find out some not so nice things, maybe.
And doesn't want to believe them. Intriguing, dear listeners. We can't wait for it.
Thank you.
But before that, get your copy of Leveling Up, either as an ebook or as a paperback. And find out about the streaming events of Desert Palm Press.
Yes, go over to the Facebook page on Desert Palm Press, and you can check out what we're doing and who we are showcasing every other week. Next one, April 10th.
You might find new authors, new books, new authors. And the list is growing and growing. Goodness me. The day has only 24 hours.
It's a never-ending story. But we try to read as much as we can.
Exactly. It is like that. So, Jazzy, thank you for joining us. It was a pleasure having you.
Great seeing you both again.
We hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as we did. And we'll meet again at Book Lovers Companion.